Hello, my horror-loving dudes. I'm KillJoy Jake, and today we're talking a little bit about one of my favorite horror films from 2023 thus far, Infinity Pool. This film is without a doubt my favorite horror movie from 2023 thus far. Let's talk a little bit about why.
Well, sometimes that is better.
Now, before we get into the review, I real quickly want to talk about some of the new merch we have at the KillJoy Jake store. You can get a Pride Ghost face, a Pride KillJoy Jake logo on a shirt, shot glass, a mug, whatever the fuck you want. And unlike most big companies, the Pride stuff won't go away after June. It's here to stay forever. On top of that, I've also had many requests from people asking if they can get themselves a Directed by Wes Carpenter shirt, and we've made that for the store as well. So go get yourself a shirt. It really helps support the channel. Thank you so much to everyone who has already gotten one. All right, now let's get into the actual video. So unfortunately, I was unable to cover Infinity Pool all the way back in January when this bad boy came out. I literally left for a little vacation right after watching this the night before, and my God, let me tell you, that was a mistake. This film captures all of my anxieties about traveling, and I love it, but I hate it. The film was written and directed by Brandon Cronenberg. That is, of course, David Cronenberg's son, but he's definitely made a big statement with this movie, saying that he's much different than his father. What's crazy about this movie is that's kind of what it's all about, but it has a lot more to say than just that, and that's what I love about it, and we're gonna get into that in a second here. The movie stars Alexander Skarsgård, who is absolutely phenomenal in movies like The Northman and, well, also this. Mia Goth, who is basically the queen of horror films at the moment. Anything she's in, I need to see. And Cleopatra Coleman, who, yes, has a limited role in this film, but kills it. The basic plot of the film, too, is James Foster, played by Alexander Skarsgård, is a struggling writer who's trying to beat writer's block. Him and his wife, Em, travel to Latolka, this resort island where he tries to battle his writer's block and, well, get something down on paper. Only like 5 or so minutes into the film, James meets Gabby, played by Mia Goth, who is absolutely phenomenal. This is one of my favorite roles from Mia Goth in general. Just because of how crazy it gets, it's maybe not as crazy as Pearl, but it's up there. Her and her husband are big fans of James's book, and basically the rest of the movie is just Gabby fucking with this guy. The next day, James and Em go on this adventure with Gabby and Albin, and it results in James running down a local. According to Latolkan law, basically this means that James has to die, or he can clone himself and kill the double. For a large sum of cash, James can essentially replicate himself, create a clone, a one-to-one copy, and kill the clone. So because of that, James, Gabby, Albin, all these characters can essentially do whatever the fuck they want. And to horribly sum up the rest of the movie, essentially, it's kind of their misadventures just getting into trouble on this little island. This is a concept we've seen in multiple movies. Most recently, Us from Jordan Peele from 2019, or maybe the most famously, The Pod People from Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The whole idea of a doppelganger or a clone is nothing new for sci-fi horror, but Infinity Pool finds a new way to spin it. You can piece together in Us that the doppelgangers were created by the US government, it was a failed experiment, yada yada yada. You probably heard this a million times from Ending Explained videos from 2019. But in Infinity Pool, they spin it a little differently. Like, the technology to make a clone is pristine, it's perfect. It literally there's no difference between the clone and the actual person. That's where a lot of the commentary comes into play in Infinity Pool in a really genius way. There's really no consequences to your actions on this island in Vacation Land. You can do whatever you want, you can go completely mad, and as long as you have money, you'll be okay. Now, Brandon Cronenberg has said that a lot of this movie is based off of some crazy vacation experiences he's had in the past, but we can also pull from real life examples of diplomats doing crazy things in countries and totally getting away with it. And on top of all of that social commentary, this movie has even more to say about Brandon Cronenberg himself. Outside of Infinity Pool, let's look at the 2 other films that Brandon Cronenberg has directed so far, Antiviral and Possessor. Antiviral is the first feature-length film written and directed by Brandon Cronenberg, going all the way back to 2012. Now, this might come as a bit of a shock that he made a movie all the way back in 2012. It's unfortunately lesser known, it wasn't as popular, although it did have a pretty good reception at Cannes Film Festival. In my opinion, a lot of Infinity Pool is about how Antiviral was received. While there are a lot of positive reviews out there for Antiviral, some of them are kind of backhandedly negative. Like on Rotten Tomatoes, for instance, there's a review of Antiviral from Jason Adams saying, "The meal, while beautifully laid out with care, is a little thin. Even at such a deliberate pace, slowest, it needs a little more meat for caressing." I just have to say, the 3 words meat for caressing next to each other has me giggling, and I really like that. I want to make a joke so bad, but I don't want to offend anybody. I'll show you some meat for caressing. Okay, I'm sorry, it came out of me, I had to say it. Infinity Pool captures a lot of the anxiety that I imagine Brandon Cronenberg has, being the son of David Cronenberg, the king of body horror. There's a lot to live up to there. I think in the character of James, because although he's an awful person for a different side of the commentary, there's a big focus on the idea of having writer's block and not being able to come up with something else, even though it's been such a long time since your last novel. Like, you have to put out content. It's a stressful thing. I deal with it every day. And although there's a lot of moments in the first act of Infinity Pool where James claims that it's writer's block, it's like, oh man, I'm trying so hard to write something else, but nothing's coming to me. A lot of it, you find out later on in the film, comes from some of the negative reviews that he had for his book. Mia Goth's Gabby character even reads them aloud to him, and it is truly one of the hardest things I've ever had to watch in a movie. God, Mia Goth is excellent in this movie. It is so hard to watch that scene where she's on the car just being a dick to Alexander Skarsgård's character. Now, although I think a big point of this movie is to say that Brandon is very different than his father, there is a lot of Cronenberg-isms in this film that I did really appreciate. First of all, this movie is fucking disgusting, and I loved every second of that. Every single bodily fluid basically is in this film at one point or the other. There's cum, blood, puke, piss. I mean, what more could you want from a horror film? The movie is very gross. It's got a lot of gore and disgusting things happening, but the best part of the horror aspect is the anxiety it creates about just travel and vacations in general. The first act of this movie captures everything I'm terrified about with going to another country, and like not being familiar with the laws and then making this critical mistake that could have you absolutely f***ed. That is one of my worst fears about traveling, and this movie captures that better than any other film I've ever seen about vacations. Something else that this movie does really well is, like, obviously that's an anxiety that like normal people may have about traveling to another country, but on top of that, if the content of your character is really shitty, like the character of James, well, maybe you kind of deserve it. A lot of what this movie is saying is that if you act like an asshole in vacation land or in a different country, you don't respect their rules, this is gonna happen to you. The cloning part, obviously not, but rotting in a jail cell somewhere because you were a dick on vacation is certainly a possibility. Now, earlier in this video, I mentioned how I had went on vacation right after seeing this movie. I was going to visit some buddies down in Boca Raton. I also just needed to get away from all of this for a little bit just to kind of write a screenplay I'm working on. You guys will get an update on that a little later. But I dragged my buddies to go see this, and the big thing they took away from it after their first viewing was the nipple scene, which is so funny to me. I don't know how else to say this except you get a close-up shot on Gabby's boob and like something happens with her nipples. I don't know. I can't explain it. It's like the areolas are crawling out of itself and like spraying out a bunch of like fleshy goo. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there, but I kind of like it. The gang of zombies, as they call themselves, forces James to kill a clone of himself, or as they call it, the dog. Now, this is symbolic to a lot of things. It's about James like kind of losing that side of himself and being this new person, but he can't really live with that, as we see with literally the last shot of the film. He can't bring himself to go back to his wife, Em. He has to stay at the resort and, well, rot. I cannot praise how airtight this script is any more than I already have. I once again want to harp on this because it's really one of my favorite things about Infinity Pool that immediately impressed me. They have the clone, and I think the whole time you might get wrapped up in the whole idea of like, is this really James that this person is killing? But that's completely besides the point. With the movie's commentary, none of that really matters. Like with Us, for example, is kind of like a comparison piece. That whole movie is about why the doppelgangers are different from the original versions. They're seen as lesser. They live below the original versions of themselves. And there's a lot to say with that, but Infinity Pool spins it in a whole new different way. I really appreciate that because this could have just been a sci-fi horror movie about clones, kept it simple, but it went a different route and it made something really special and, well, original with it. It's gross, it's clever, it's got an airtight script. I love everything about this movie. I mean, honest to God, if I have to say something negative about it, the only thing I would change about the entire movie is some of those shots early on at the beginning where with the rotating camera and the scary music before anything scary has happened. I mean, look, the point of those shots is obviously to tell us that something's wrong at this resort or on this island that we don't know too much about yet. But like, this is a Brandon Cronenberg movie. Of course something's gonna be fucking wrong. Like, look, Brandon's making a big point here to stand apart from his father. I get that, but his past two movies have been pretty fucked up nonetheless. Yes, in a somewhat different style than what his father does, but it's still there. That's the only thing I would change, and even that is so minuscule. Does it even matter? I love this movie. It's a 10 out of 10, a goddamn masterpiece, and I can't wait to own the 4K relatively soon here. I absolutely loved Infinity Pool, but what did you guys think about it? Leave me something about it in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching this new review video. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more review videos and update videos in the future. Please consider supporting me on Patreon if you want to see this channel grow, and as always, don't forget to kill it out there, y'all.